The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." The Gospel of the Lord. Halloween is upon us. Halloween is upon us. Homes are filled with candy and costumes, and scary movies flicker across TV screens as little ghosts and goblins filter out onto the sidewalk in search of treats. And at least one of you has came dressed for the occasion. Haunted houses have sprung up, offering a scare for the price of admission. Fields and farms, too, have been turned into eerie places where spirits rustle with the wind. Halloween is a time for fright. All of this is for fun, of course, but there is a version of Christianity. There is a version of Christianity that can make God out to be a little scary as well, without the amusement. This is a view that depicts God as someone whose voice echoes down from the heavens with that hollow booming sound of the laughter of a ghost. Someone who is keeping a threatening eye on all your actions. Someone about whom you best be on guard, or else you might end up in a very frightening place. A vision of God as an ominous rule giver who sends the disobedient to hell. That's the way that some look at the commandments. Many see the rules of Christianity as simply prohibitions that aim you from barring what you would otherwise do if there was no fear of hell to worry about. On this account, the rules have their force chiefly because they are backed up by the threat of eternal damnation. The Pharisees seem to have had a view like this. They often appear to be obsessed with rules. Their interest is in checking compliance, marking infractions, and following steps. Kind of like a religious hall monitor, ready to distribute demerits. But Jesus lets them know that that's not really the kind of relationship with God or with the commandments that he has in mind. What does he envision? Well, one reason why Jesus doesn't share this view of following the commandments because we better or else, is because that view puts us in opposition with God. Think about it. It means that our happiness, what we really want, and what God wants are miles apart. A decision to follow the commandments then becomes little more than a kind of negotiation with the afterlife. It's like saying, look, we will refrain from doing certain things we would otherwise do, but only because God may eventually catch up with us and deem us unworthy for heaven. But this is not at all what Jesus describes in the gospel. The whole law and the prophets depend on something else. Our happiness and what God wants from us are not two different things, even if they might seem that way sometimes. Getting to heaven was never intended to be a task. of seeing how close you can come up against a rule without breaking it, where the chief question is, how far can I go without crossing the line? Have you ever asked yourself that question? If you find yourself navigating Christian life in those terms, how far can I go without crossing the line? There is much about this faith that you simply are not getting. It is a pity to think of our relationship with God in those terms, where God wants compliance and we want happiness, and we're stuck negotiating between the two in order to keep from going to hell. That was never the faith that Jesus professed. But do you think of your relationship with God in those terms? If so, know that that is sort of the opposite of what Jesus is saying in this gospel. You are sharing in the mind of the Pharisees. Secondly, the problem with a roles-based focused on God is that it suggests that God only cares about part of your life, the part about the rules. Just follow the rules. Don't cross any lines. And aside from that, you may do as you please. So far as you meet the standards of acceptable compliance with the rules, whatever else you do in this view, whatever else you do in this life is up to you. That idea is clearly unbiblical. God cares about everything in your life. Jesus lets the Pharisees know that the Christian life isn't chiefly one of checklists and rules compliance. It's not what the commandments are even all about. The commandments aren't about passing a test. What following the commandments is designed to do is train or shape you into the kind of person who does things because you care, not simply because you have a duty that you must fulfill or a fear you must avoid. Following the commandments is an exercise in becoming, a growing, into the type of person fit for heaven. Now that doesn't mean that the rules are unimportant. It means that the rules are something like, there's something like rails designed to keep you from tumbling down and falling off a cliff. There are different ways to love, and the commandments are designed to teach how to love as heaven loves. So the rules are important. They are just not the point. What do I mean by that? Well, consider all the souls and angels in heaven as folks playing some sort of game. Now imagine that you are inserted into the game that everyone else is clearly enjoying. What if you don't know the rules of the game? You might well become frustrated. You might want to quit and exit the game altogether. No one will have to kick you out. You will leave on your own accord. You can tell that everyone who knows how to play is having the time of their lives. But it is only confusion and frustration for those who don't know how. The rules are not why. The rules are not why anyone loves the game, but they allow you to find enjoyment in the game. God won't force you to enjoy heaven any more than He'll shove the commandments down your throat today. God proposes, He doesn't impose. And learning to incorporate the commandments in this life is meant to teach you the rules of the game. Consider another example. Halloween. If you showed up in this world without knowing the custom of Halloween, you might think that dressing up as ghouls and goblins, vampires or villains, is a little macabre. Going to a haunted house to see a movie where you actually have to pay for the thrill of being scared might not make much sense either, nor would going to a stranger's house and asking for candy. You can't enjoy this kind of thing without some acclimation to the custom. It's not fun if you don't understand it. Heaven is something like that. And so is trusting in God, and that He knows best, which can be scary at times. And becoming accustomed to trusting God and following His direction through the ups and downs, through the scariness of life, is precisely how He trains us for heaven. God isn't trying to scare us, but He's trying to teach us the kind of attitude we need to have to fit into heaven. Heaven is something like that game I mentioned earlier. To enjoy the game, you have to know the rules. But the rules aren't the kind of thing meant to be a threat of punishment. The rules are designed to teach you how you will enjoy yourself. Which means that heaven isn't a reward for obedience. God doesn't treat us like pets, such that if we follow some command, He will give us a treat. It's not the idea that He describes in the gospel. Rather, God looks to us as children. He says so Himself. That's why we say, "Our Father." And like any loving parent, while He wants His children's obedience, He wants more than that. He wants much more than that, their love and their trust, and never their fear.